This is going to be the first part of our lesson on section 3.4. It's on slope, which is not a new concept. You should know that slope is the steepness of a line, or the angle that the line is sitting. So the slope of a non-vertical line is defined as the ratio of the rise, or the vertical change, to the run, or the horizontal change, as you move from one point on the line to another. So if a line in the coordinate plane passes through these 2 points, then the slope is going to be this. It's going to be the rise over the run. Notice how slope is this lowercase m. That's going to end up being the change in your y values divided by the change in your x values. And you find that by subtracting your y values for the numerator and subtracting your x values for the denominator. So here's a formula for finding slope. And that's just what we talked about on that last slide. Change in the y's divided by the change in the x's. You've definitely used this before. So we're going to practice finding slope of these lines. So if you have a line that has 2 points in the coordinate plane, what would the slope of their lines be? Well, I'm going to point out the x's in all of these examples. And I'm going to point out the y values. You can do the same thing. You could use color if you want, or you can make some kind of notation what the x's are and what the y's are. I want to find slope. That's lowercase m. And that's going to involve me subtracting the x's, which would be on the bottom, and the y's, which would be on the top. I'll use yellow. I'll do the y values first. So these are your y values. And you want to subtract them. So I'm going to put in -6. The minus is already there. +3. I'm going to subtract my x values in that same order. Now, if I switch these around, I would have to switch these around, and vice versa. Now, we're going to simplify our slope. We like our slope written as a fraction so we can see the rise and the run. -6 minus 3 is -9. 5 minus -2 is +7. Now, depending on how you did this, you may have gotten your negative in a different spot. But remember, a negative divided by a positive is still a negative. A positive divided by a negative is still negative. So what I'm telling you is, these two fractions are the same. It doesn't matter where your negative goes. Likewise, you can put the negative out in front of the fraction. These three fractions are equivalent. This would be the slope of our line. It would have a negative slope. So if we're using this one, we would go down. We would go down 9 and 7 to the right because this is our rise and this is our run. For number 6, we're going to subtract. And up here, we went with -6 minus 3. I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to do -8 first, and I'm going to subtract 7. And notice the change that I have to account for in the denominator. Since I chose this as my first y value, I need to choose the -1 as my first x value. So we'll do -1 minus 4. You're going to get a fraction. That's what we want. -8 minus 7 is -15. -1 minus 4 is -5. Now we need to simplify this, and you can type this right into your calculator and hit math, enter, enter to change that to a reduced fraction. But we know a negative divided by negative is a positive. 15 divided by 5 is 3. So you can write it as 3, you wouldn't be incorrect, but writing it as 3/1 is better because we can see the rise and the run. Always write your slopes as fractions. We'll do number 7 together also. I'm going to take my y values, 2 and 3, and subtract them. In the same order, I'm going to take my x's and subtract them. So here's our slope. It's negative. It doesn't matter where the negative is. So if you ended up with this answer, that's fine. If you wrote the answer like this, it's fine also. You could actually just write it as -5 if you wanted to, but remember we like a fraction for our slopes. Here's a good thing to help you remember when we start graphing lines or plotting the points. If your line goes uphill from left to right, so if you're driving a car from the left to the right on this graph, notice how you're going uphill. That means your slope is going to be positive. Okay, now if you're driving left to right and you're going downhill, your slope's going to be negative. If you're driving on a flat road, like the line is horizontal, your slope is going to be 0. We're going to think about that for a second. Let's pretend there's 2 points here. What would the rise be to get from here to here? The rise is going to be 0. The run is 2 in this case, but 0 divided by anything is 0. That's why you end up with a 0 slope. So the next time you see a horizontal line, you could just say that the slope is 0. We know that. Now, let's do the same thing if we have a vertical line. If we're going from this point to this point, the rise is +2. But the run left to right, we're not moving left or right. We're staying right here on this line. So you're dividing by 0, which we know is an undefined operation. You can't do that. I always like to give this example. If you were sled riding, how fast would you be moving on this hill? 0 miles an hour. If you were sled riding down this hill, what's going to happen to you? You're going to end up being undefined.